Welcome, everybody, to White Women. What exactly are we so afraid of? This is the second in a series of LinkedIn Lives. The first one was White Women. It's time to break our silence and change the status quo. And I'm so honored to be joined here by Adina Rose and Randy Seidner. My name is Karen Fleshman. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the founder of Racy Conversations and the co-founder of the Interracial Sisterhood Coalition. And thank you to everyone who is tuning in and joining us. And please go ahead and put in the chat if you're joining us, where you're joining us from, and your name and your pronouns and how you're feeling today as we enter into this conversation. Adina, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, yes. I'm really happy to be back with my sisters here, Karen and Randy. I'm currently residing on Ohlone territory in the LaShawn areas, known now as Berkeley and Kensington in the East Bay of California. And yeah, I'm really riveted by the conversation and looking forward to interacting with the folks who chose to be here with us. Thanks for tuning in today.
Hi.
Hey there. Great to be here with you two this early evening or late afternoon, depending on where you are, I guess. My name's Randy Seidner. I'm calling in from Sebastopol, California, also known by the native people as the coastal Miwok and Pomo lands. And yeah, just grateful to be here and be in conversation with you two.
Yes. So in our past conversation, we started talking about why white women need to break our silence and be more vocal and demand change to the status quo. We talked a lot about the power that white women have. And as Alice Walker observed, the most frequent way people give up their power is by believing that they don't have any. And one of the things that came up in our conversation is fear. And we got a question from one of the participants. Well, what exactly is it that white women are so afraid of? So we made that the subject matter for today. And so I'd like to begin with that question. What is it when we talk about fear? What is it that holds us back? What are we so afraid of?
If there are any white women out there, you can put their posts in the
Yes. And if you have thoughts, if you're a white woman watching this, please put your thoughts in there. I will speak from my experience. I have been a people pleaser throughout my life. I've always been the mediator and the one to bridge conflicts, and I want everybody to like me. That's been one of my biggest drivers throughout my life, and it's taken me a really long time to adjust to the idea that I don't have to please everybody. Like, I have to live my truth and I have to live my values. And if there's some people who like that, that's great. And if there's some people who don't, that's okay too. But it's not my job to bend and shift and become who everybody wants me to be. It's my job to live my life and live my truth.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Karen. I'm going to go out on a limb here and talk a little bit about something that I believe very strongly in, and wonder if the folks who are listening do as well. I know that Karen and Randy do, because we've talked about it before. in intergenerational and historical trauma. Randy and Karen and I actually met at an action in Denver to ban guns, and I had a very interesting epiphany when I was there. And I don't know if I've shared this with you two yet, but there was a woman, there was a lot of press there, and people were going around, you know, asking people for interviews, and I felt kind of called. And at one point they asked me to do one, and I really struggled back and forth around this. And I had some really interesting things dawn on me around my ancestral heritage living in a Jewish body, and the fact that, like, speaking up, you know, my ancestors would have been very nervous to speak up about anything, to draw any kind of attention to themselves. They were in a survival mode a lot of the time. And so I've really done a lot of work on that to sort of bring myself up to date a little bit and heal some of my ancestral trauma, so that I'm living with what's actually in front of me now. So am I actually afraid, or is this living in my body from something that has been passed down to me? So that's an inquiry that I've worked with, and that I think I've, will continue to work with, but it's part of what I think my body is afraid of.
Yes. And we talked about that last time, that as Resmaa teaches, white supremacy is a trauma response, right? And so we've experienced, our ancestors have experienced mob violence at the hands of other white people, and we're trying to shield ourselves and protect ourselves from that mob violence. And we talked about that with white women in particular being targeted for being outspoken, like with witch hunts and things of that nature. So I think there's intergenerational trauma definitely in Jewish bodies, and there's intergenerational trauma in white women's bodies as well.
Yeah, we look at that from a historical context as well, like just looking at white supremacy, and we can see that, like, our white identity is grounded in the experiences of fear and control and violence, right? And so that ancestral piece comes in through that. I believe that historically for hundreds of years we're still feeling that in our bodies, right? And that's a consequence of our annihilating, like, one people, the Native Americans, right? And also enslaving Africans. Like, it's just so in us, and it's so consistent. It's a consistent theme, this fear of people, bodies of culture, how we're fear slave revolt. I'm talking about historically now, like slave revolts, and we fear of loss of political power, and like in the time of Reconstruction, right? And then we move into like fear of declining property values. Like, there's so much there. And then when we go into the interpersonal piece of it, and we look at the fear of loss of power and the loss of privilege that we have, like, we worry about. And then it even comes down to even the personal level, where we're affected by fear to be in conversation with our people of the global majority, right? And we fear what if we're going to say something wrong, or if we're going to do something wrong, or offend somebody, or break a relationship. There's so much there. And it's like you said, Adina, circling back to that historical intergenerational piece. So yeah.
I think a lot about that fear of losing my privilege. And we touched on this last time. I think that's a huge part of it. Like, I know that my privilege is tied up in my silence of others' oppression. And so I'd rather be quiet and be comfortable and maintain my privilege than speak out.
Yeah. I wonder too a lot about in over those last several years being in this work, like, I get frustrated when I'm trying to share this truth with folks, or help people, like, please join me in this work. Come be with me in this work. And I feel like the deepest fear is that we white women, I'm speaking of white women in this moment, and me included, have, like, if we see things for what they truly are, and we'll see ourselves for what we truly are, then we're going to have to like face the injustice of like the heart of our nation or the world, really, right? And we're going to have to deal with the undue power and privilege that we've been afforded for so long. So
And we're
that's
gonna have to deal with our own self-image,
yeah, and
like,
our
as
identity, right?
as good people, right? We think of ourselves as good people and incapable of doing all this evil stuff when in fact we're deeply engaged in doing evil stuff. Um,
Yeah.
as we were talking about this, I can't remember where I heard someone talking about this recently, but that we are so conditioned to be comfortable, right? If it's slightly too cold, we can turn up the heat. If something is too far away, we can hop in our car and drive to it. If we need something, we can pick up our phone and have it delivered in a matter of minutes. Like, we're so conditioned to our comfort
Yeah.
that the idea of becoming slightly uncomfortable is something that we run away from instead of realizing like how important it is to get uncomfortable, to unpack these things, and to we're never going to disrupt the status quo if we maintain our comfort.
Hmm.
Absolutely. And there's ways to sort of, inch forward towards that, like bit by bit, put a toe in, say the thing, surround yourself with people who are there,
Hmm.
aren't going to judge you, or are going to hold you accountable.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, this is
Mm.
we have a great comment. Ijeoma Oluo said it best in her book, So You Want to Talk About Race. You have to get over the fear of facing the worst in yourself. You should instead fear unexamined racism. Fear the thought that right now you could be contributing to the oppression of others and you don't know it. But do not fear those who bring that oppression to light. Do not fear the opportunity to do better. Yes. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, RJ. So, so true. And I also love, I can't remember where she said something about like, you don't have to be perfect. Like, no one is perfect. Like this idea, oh, I'm going to strive for perfection and do everything. That is also a hallmark of white supremacy culture, right? We can mess up. We can take accountability. We can take a pause and then we can keep going and don't drop out. Keep our energy going.
That reminds me of the question Isabel Wilkerson asks is like, um, do I love this house enough to put in the work to repair? I think I have that question right, to repair it. And that's from her book Cast. And we make the decision about whether we care enough about racial justice and equity to get over our fear of talking about race, right? There's that.
1,000%.
Yeah.
1,000%.
Keep
And
that.
knowing too that this isn't about, you know, solving racism or ending racism. It's also about our own transformation. It's also about like, our own transformation and healing and growth. Like we are trapped in this as well. As obviously racism does not harm us in the way that we harm global majority people through our racism, but we are harmed by it as well.
Yeah.
That was a big surprise to me when I really started doing the work about how liberated I was becoming, even though I went out there to liberate the Black and brown bodies. That's what I thought I was doing. And
White saviorism.
oh yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
And then I started noticing how much freer I felt, and all the areas that I was, oppressed by in my thoughts and my beliefs and my conditioning, patriarchy, all that just opened up.
I was really struck this last time. Ah, thank you, Dan. Thank you so much. I was really struck by this last time watching Deconstructing Karen. So we hosted a screening. Randy hosted a screening of Deconstructing Karen in her home, the film about Syra Rao and Regina Jackson's work confronting white women about our racism. And there were two parts that really struck me. One was when a white woman spoke about how it was so hard for her to face her racism because she already has very low self-esteem, and it took her a long time to build up her self-esteem, and now she has to take on top of it considering herself a racist. And that was a time when literally everyone around the table started laughing. Like, I felt like they could really identify with that feeling. So I think it's also about developing our self-confidence and our self-esteem by literally growing up and being grown-ass women. That's a big part of being able to face our racism. And the other part that really struck me is when Cyrus says, "Stop capping for the patriarchy, unite with us, and let's overthrow the patriarchy altogether." And it pans to all the white women's faces, and literally they just have like this blank stare. Like, what are you talking about? I think that's how deeply embedded we are in patriarchy, that like the idea of rebelling against the system that does in many ways provide us with a lot of comfort, like it seems kind of unfathomable.
Well, we think it's comfort, but it's
We think
actually, yeah,
yes.
it's a falsity, right? It's really about scarcity and separation and powerlessness. Really, that's what patriarchy is, right?
And
You,
control and
yeah,
domination. Yeah.
I mean, it's the fundamental mindset. Patriarchal mindset is now like everywhere. There are no societies where patriarchy, well, maybe there's these little tiny pockets of indigenous folks or matriarchal societies, but for the most part, we are everywhere is a patriarchal system. And so it's so in all of us.
Yeah, we're getting off the topic, of course, of what we're afraid of, but I think that's great. I'm just thinking about how we've been conditioned to sort of just numb out of all of it.
Numb out.
How long
Yes.
I did that.
Yeah.
And we numb because we're afraid. So it's all related.
Yes.
Yeah, we numb because we're afraid.
Racism is shorthand for racial hierarchy, valuing and devaluing humans by the mythological construct of race, which is the root of white male supremacy. White women have the power to disrupt white male supremacy by aligning power with non-white women who have stronger voices but less power. The enemy is the same white male supremacist. Yes. And
Absolutely.
yeah, for many of us, our abusers are our fathers, are our husbands, are our even our sons, our children, right? And so yeah, there's this sense of loyalty, like, oh, I can't rebel against this person even though they're really toxic and harming me.
And we know what, we can't do that alone either. Like, not one person's not going to be like, I'm just going to go do this now. I mean, people do, and that's great, but we really need each other to support each other to do that.
We have to have community.
We can't
Yes.
buy into the, the white supremacy culture of, individualism. And, we were harmed in community. We need to heal in community and then rise up in community.
Yeah. I was really struck listening to Cori Bush gave a talk this week. Representative Cori Bush, who represents Ferguson and that part of Missouri, gave a talk this week at a Black Women in Politics conference. And she was talking about her and Ayanna Pressley's decision to reintroduce the Equal Rights Amendment. And they said, like, they hadn't really thought about doing that because they thought of the Equal Rights Amendment as being something for white women. But then they realized that if we got the Equal Rights Amendment, it would be the foundation to so many other things that they're struggling for, whether it's ending health disparities or wage disparities or all different kinds of things. And so it's really essential work. And it comes back to when women unite across difference, we can we can change everything. We can make it much, much better for all women.
Yeah. We need to have the honest conversations.
Yeah.
Without that, there can be no racial healing, right? And I think that's what you're trying to do with Interracial Sisterhood Coalition, is to bring about these honest conversations. And I mean conversations, not just one. It's so systemic that we as individuals, we can't do it by ourselves. And these being racist is about a system, really, not a structure. And that's, I think, where the fear gets misaligned. Like we personalize it and it becomes individualized, whereas it's a system and we can't get locked into, oh, I am scared to do. And that's again where community comes in, I believe.
Yes. And this is why we would love for you to join us. We have a couple of upcoming events. We are going to be having an in-person interracial sisterhood event here in San Francisco. That is coming up on April 17th. So we would love for you to come to that. And I'm going to, I will pop the invitation to that event in the chat. And while I'm doing that, if any of our viewers have any questions or comments that they'd like to add, we would love to hear those things. Okay, hold on one second.
The honest has a question.
We have a question here from Dan. Do you believe some white women face unfair stigmatization based on the notion that white women are the number one beneficiaries of white privilege? I don't think that's unfair. I mean, I think that is true. I think that white women are the number one beneficiaries of white privilege. And there's many ways that we can name that, but this entire system was designed around protecting the delicate white woman. And that's been the excuse for so much horrific, horrific violence, and whether that's in the workplace or uh, in the community, I don't think it's unfair to stigmatize, and I don't think it's a stigma to call white women the number one beneficiaries of white privilege. I think what we have to do is bust out of our segregated social circles, and then we start to understand how that operates. When you're inside the bubble, it can be really hard to see how it's operating. And it was through a lot of reading and, watching movies and interpersonal conversations that I began to realize, oh, I am in this big, like, bubble of privilege. Do you want to say anything about that comment?
I think you covered it quite well, personally. Adina, do you have anything else?
I agree with what you said. And I think it's
Yes.
something that, I'm still working with.
And here, oh, Mike, this is a great strategy for white women that doesn't require courage. Subscribe to ethnic media. Buy and read books written by non-white authors. Intentionally engage in events and gatherings with diverse audiences. Expose white children to all of these environments. Teach white children what they won't learn in schools and churches. 1,000%. Yes. Yes, there are many ways for us to learn and grow and find community and speak out together. That is how we build strength. As you were saying, Adina, we can't do this by ourselves, but there's true strength is in community and organizing together.
Yeah, I think that brings a good point around our white women cohort that's coming up here,
Yes.
starting next week. Around we're coming together as sisters to examine and explore a lot of these topics that we've been talking about, and to really dive deep into the topics, but also into how we can be together and support one another while we're diving deep into this, because it's not easy work.
1,000%. And I'm going to put the link to that in the chat as well. Well, thank you both so much for joining us. Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Dan, and everybody else who tuned in. Do you have any parting thoughts? I would say one practice that I'm trying to develop is to really feel my anger, to not, like, yeah, I think that's part of it. Like, I need to get in touch with my anger and not try to shrink or quell my anger, but really, really experience it.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to recognize my fear when it arises, because it shows up in lots of different ways. It shows up in not knowing or getting it wrong. So I'm trying to really somatically tune in. Like, my body tells me that I'm having fear, right? And so differentiating between what it is actually the truth, besides what my head's trying to tell me, but really tuning in. And or if I'm, the fear will arise if I'm being silent, and then I'm being silent, or I'm
Mm.
avoiding. So it's, really paying attention to my body to get the clues.
Sorry, my dog's about to start barking. Yeah, I think for me, it's just a real balance of that inner work and the outer work. Like doing this inner, you have to kind of be doing both. Sorry for my dogs. I don't know if you can hear
Yes.
her. Yeah, so just working internally on healing the things and being aware of them, and then turning that into action.
Yes. And getting out in the world and making actual change.
Yeah. And reaching out to our sisters when we're stuck in it, and going, can you walk with me? Can you be with me here while I'm recognizing I'm having this fear or whatever? That's the sisterhood is really important.
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much, Mike. That's exactly what we're working on in the Interracial Sisterhood Coalition, is expanding our friendship uh, relationships and making our circles more diverse, because that will, we believe, when we're in right relationship with each other, activism will emerge from that is informed by the lived experiences of people who need change, right? The most marginalized people. So this is exactly what we're working on in the Interracial Sisterhood Coalition. Okay. Well, thank you all for tuning in. We will be back. I'm not quite sure when, but we will definitely share that with you. And yes, we appreciate your participation, and we'll talk soon.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.